On Production is brought to you by Wrapbook, the production industry's only on-demand payroll platform. With Wrapbook, you can pay your crew with a click and track all your costs in real time, all in one place. To find out more about how Wrapbook is transforming the way productions pay their crews, visit wrapbook.com.
Welcome to On Production, where we dive into the fascinating world of film and entertainment through the eyes of those who make it happen. Today, we're joined by Darragh, a seasoned expert in production insurance, actually here at Wrapbook. He has an incredibly diverse background spanning from film production to educating future filmmakers at LSU. And Adam just brings a wealth of knowledge and experience, not just in the world of production, but also production insurance. So today he's going to help us unpack the intricacies of production insurance and share insights from his journey in the industry. Adam, welcome to On Production.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Adam, the very first thing I want to ask is, what are some of the key factors that filmmakers should consider when budgeting for insurance, especially those working with tight budgets?
Yeah, so too often filmmakers wait until the very last minute to try to fit their insurance budget in. They'll come up with all of their stunts, how they're going to do their stunts, and then they go to try to get insurance for them, and they find that it costs more than they budgeted for, or they're going to have to perform their stunt in a slightly different way to make it insurable. And if they'd brought their insurance broker in earlier in the process, it could have been a conversation where they could align their creative, what's possible budgetary-wise and otherwise. And instead, they bring us in at the very last moment. And, maybe they go with a policy that's not covering them as much as they would like it to or as they think they do, because they didn't have enough time to have that conversation. Or they wind up having to make some large creative decisions that they would rather not have had to make if they'd had a little bit more time. So that's the first thing that comes up. But we can go as deep into this as you want.
Well, I think that we should go deep. I think you have such a wellspring of information that's really helpful for filmmakers. How about we kind of break it into bits? Can you walk us through the process of assessing a production's insurance needs? How does the nature of a project influence the type of coverage required?
Yeah, so first off, if we're talking about a commercial or a music video, a documentary, a lot of those risks are pretty similar. So commercial, you'll get a crowd of people and they'll be there for a day and then it's done. A doc is much longer, but you'll have a few people shooting regularly, web series the same, over a long span of time. The risk about washes out to about the same. We can usually cover those things on what's called a DICE policy. It's an annual policy that covers all that documentary, industrial, commercial, educational, music video work. So the first question I suppose I would ask is, what kind of projects do you do? Are there multiple projects? If so, what kind of projects are we talking about? And if it's those documentaries, commercials, music videos, that sort of thing, we can go with the DICE policy, get one policy to cover all of that work. And usually if you're doing 3 or more productions in a year, the DICE policy winds up being the better buy. You get much higher coverage and you can pay for this over a long time as opposed to paying minimum premiums for every single production you have. So that's the first thing I ask. After that, if it's a feature film or a TV series, we have to quote that a little bit differently. The risks are really unique. You have a lot of people on set with a lot of expensive equipment for a chunk of time. Back when I used to work on set, 5 weeks would be a short movie. Office would be going a long time before and a long time after. Just have a lot more things at play. So we would quote that by itself. We bring in all sorts of different stuff. So, of course, you're thinking stunts, you're thinking budget, you're thinking you have a really cool techno crane in this shot and you need to make sure that it's all covered, drones. But another thing that we're looking at is, what is the cost per day? So if you're shooting $1 million film in a week, you go down one day, that's a huge claim, and that's going to limit the amount of insurers that will work on it. And that will also affect how much you're going to have to pay for insurance. Last thing I want to just name drop is errors and omissions policies. So if you do features in TV, you know this. It's required mostly for distribution and things like that. Professional liability that's going to follow your film. DICE people can get it on an annual basis. Feature films, TV, get it for a single project. I bring it up because everybody gets it at the end of the project. But the term is 3 years for a feature E&O policy. And so long as your film debuts in those 3 years, those risks are covered. So folks intend to buy E&O, and then they wait until the end when it would have covered them just the same and cost the same, and they knew they were going to get it. And then if they have a script claim or something like that during their production shuts down, or they owe all this money because they didn't purchase E&O earlier. So that's just a shout out for most folks. If you're going to have to buy it anyway, buy it up front when you're settling up the rest of your production insurance and get a little bit more coverage for no extra cost.
It's a very good tip. I had not ever heard that before. That makes a lot of sense. You know, Adam, you mentioned this a little bit, but stunts and special effects obviously add an exciting element to a commercial or to films, but it also comes with increased risks. How should producers approach insurance for scenes involving higher risk, or how should they just deal with stunts generally when it comes to risk and insurance?
Well, I'll get basic with this and talk about risk just in general. And I'd say be realistic about your risk. I've been surprised how many independent filmmakers, based on their experience with insurance, they think maybe there's a single price for insurance. So when I come back with a realistic cost for the things that they're telling me they plan to do, it seems too high because they thought insurance is always just a set fee. I've never thought this myself, but I've talked to enough people like that I wanted to bring it up. Another thing to keep in mind is you may do a feature film for $30,000 in your house, shot over a week. And then if you're so successful with it, you get to remake it and you get $2 million. And filmmakers will come to me and they'll say, why is this quote this high? You're ripping me off. My last policy cost me, $5,000 and you're quoting me 30. But the budget is so different. We're in a completely different ballpark now. And so I say be realistic about your risk. I'd like to say once you have a healthy budget, insurance should be between 1% to 3% of your budget. The lower budget you are, the bigger bite it's going to take because of minimum premiums. And risks are the same way. So we've just talked about general risk of production insurance and how it scales as budgets get larger. Stunts, high-value vehicles, things like this, increase your risk profile a little more because if you're blowing something up, then you're going to have to make sure not just that you've got insurance to cover the buildings that might be affected by the blowing up, but the insurance company is going to want to know who's doing it. How experienced are they? You might even have to get on a risk control call with the insurance company to be able to, for them to ascertain how safe do we really think this is going to be. Some filmmakers, when a stunt gets turned down, get really upset, understandably so. But sometimes a stunt gets turned down because an insurance company realizes this person doesn't have the level of expertise to perform this kind of stunt. It would be acceptable if you had a long list of credits, pulled proper permits, all that stuff. An insurance company, they're trying to really watch out for you at the end of the day so that if you have a loss, they're going to cover it just fine. And some of these risk control conversations we have with stunts are trying to make sure that you, the filmmaker, have all of your ducks in a row so that, yes, claims do happen. But just looking at all the facts laid out in front of us, it seems like this is going to be a safe undertaking, even though it will look really cool on camera.
Super insightful. I want to shift gears a little bit to a less, or rather a more sad topic, which is insurance claims. A claim is when something terrible happens and insurance has to kick in. What are the most common types of claims you see in film production insurance, and what can producers do to mitigate these risks, Adam?
Great question. The most common claim by far is auto physical damage. So cars getting damaged by other cars getting damaged by stunts, a crew member laying back from a little bit too far away, hitting the hood of the car. He's just trying to rest and putting a big dent in it. Since the pandemic, auto claims nationwide, not just production, have gone way up because of computers and things in cars, inflation, and unavailability of parts due to wars and things like that. These auto claims are so much more expensive than they used to be. So that's the number one thing. You can mitigate it like most claims that you can mitigate it by hiring good people. Now, on auto physical damage, it's always a little different. So auto physical damage, the gold standard is to get a moving vehicle record, MVR, for anyone who's going to be driving for you. And you can get that from the driver's local DMV. You can pull it online usually. And what that does, it shows you their driving history. And for the most part, in my experience, we're able to get a driver approved, no problem. But I have had cases where we pulled the MVR and there is a list of moving violations. The producer may or may not have been aware of it. And when you see that, you realize, okay, maybe I want this person to be working with me, but I can't give them the keys as a driver. Another big thing I see is tossing the keys to an 18-year-old PA, not knowing anything about their driving history, and letting them be the driver. Most limbs that hit cars or mailboxes that are knocked down or parked cars that are hit tend to happen from these inexperienced young PAs. And I would ask a producer, yes, you obviously need them to do this work for you, but is there a way that you can give the keys to a more experienced driver? Maybe they're used to driving a box truck or whatever, and that would go a long way toward mitigating this most common risk. So that's auto physical damage. After that, you get to equipment damage, location damage. You can deal with that by hiring competent people. A great locations department that treats the buildings well, lays down cardboard or whatever, make sure all the gaff tape is cleaned up, all that stuff. You mitigate that by having good locations people who also set down rules and communicate them so that nothing in the house is damaged or wherever you are. Equipment, same thing. Hiring qualified people, communicating well so that you're not rolling the dolly into a place where electric is trying to light and then you have a collision and then something breaks. Communication from the AD department on down, as well as good professional people who know how to handle this gear, is the way you mitigate it. I'm going to throw in one last thing. Enterprise risk management idea. The idea is sometimes in film, we think of ourselves as, all right, I'm the AD department, I'm grips, I'm electric, I'm catering, I'm hair, I'm whatever. And we think of that, we silo ourselves into these separate departments. And so if there's a holdup, we say, oh, electric, they're holding us up. Camera, they're holding us up. Certainly that is true sometimes. But something I want you to think about is, all right, so if camera holds you up, it's going to hold up the whole production. We don't get to go home because of that. And if we did something that held camera up, then we're a part of that too. And if we are all realizing, like, it's not my role as an AD to go and pick up a camera and move it. Absolutely not. But it is my role to maybe say, all right, we're doing a move. Looks like camera is having a little bit of trouble wrapping out. I've got 2 free PAs from the AD department. Grip's got a free grip. We could pitch and say, hey, what can we do? We can't touch cameras. Maybe we could grab your tent. If we can help each other and also communicate really well, we can sometimes make sure that whole day goes much more safely and smoothly, because we realize a loss to one department is going to, in some way, be a loss to all of us, or a loss to the final product that we're working so hard for.
That is such insightful information, Adam. A little bit more on this subject related to special coverage. So for productions involving really unique elements like underwater scenes, animals, or international locations, what special types of insurance coverage should producers consider?
Yeah, so on things like animals, that's declaring it to your production package, to your insurance policy, the main insurance policy for your feature, dice policy, whatever. Once you go a little bit more broad than that, you do get into the world of specialized coverages. So drone, for example, is really common, but drone laws are really complex and they keep changing. So we often might go to a separate kind of drone provider for that. Underwater, we might have to go to a movie boat policy, which is a policy that is written very specifically with nautical risks and types of boats, types of water activities in, included. And so we would have to, instead of doing that as part of your package, we would go out and get that separate. Of course, to the filmmaker, they know that they had something else to pay, but all they really know at the end of the day is that they're properly covered. So a lot of that is a broker you trust working behind the scenes to make sure all the risks that a filmmaker brings up on that. And then the last one, you mentioned foreign coverage. A lot of policies, the liability portion, so auto liability and general liability, a lot of those kind of stop at the borders of the US and Canada. So if you're going to do a production beyond that, going to Europe, Africa, wherever, we might get you a foreign package policy to cover you there. Some filmmakers will have an entity, say in Europe, and so they get a European policy. But I'm speaking of a US-based company going and doing a scene in Canada, fine. It's probably going to be just fine, put onto your DICE policy, feature policy, whatever. But if you're going beyond that, Mexico, Europe, etc., we get you that foreign package policy to cover you abroad. I'll give you one last little bit on the foreign package policy. So you're used to in the US, probably GL, auto, inland marine, or production package, that's your equipment, workers' comp. Once you get abroad, some of the risks are the same, and then it adds some other ones. So if you're going to Mexico right now, on that foreign package policy, you would find kidnap and ransom listed there. Why? Because you're in a film shoot, you got a lot of gear, you are conspicuous, and there are problems throughout that country right now, and not always in the most predictable places. And so a foreign package policy is going to have kidnap and ransom. They're going to have travel, accident, and sickness, which is beyond workers' comp, because sometimes when you're not working, but you're in another country for work, you get sick or something happens, and it behooves the production to have some coverage in place to get you care, even though it is not workers' comp because you weren't working, and that can get you back to the U.S. if needed. And all these things, last thing, all these things can be separate as well. So let's say you're going with a major star to Veracruz in Mexico or Venezuela, someplace. Please don't take a star to Venezuela at this time. But say that happened, and you know you're going to want some extra coverage for them. So you might get a separate kidnap and ransom policy, which much larger, to cover those folks. Although I'll say the last thing, generally it's not the star that's at risk. It is the grip who's very tired and is coming home and is separated from the group. And that's where you see those sorts of claims.
Really insightful. You know, every independent filmmaker especially wants to know if there are some strategies for managing insurance costs without compromising essential coverage. Do you have any thoughts there?
That's great. I think being realistic about cost from the beginning is very helpful, because the first thing I look at when I break down a budget for an independent film is, of course, what the whole budget is, but then I see what they put as the budget for insurance. If it's super, super low, I know they're not realistic about what these sorts of things cost. I would say plan 1% to 3%. I'd probably say on your initial budget, plan 3%. Hopefully it'll be lower than that. But then you've got something to work with, and you're not having to make sacrifices later on when you get a price that is appropriate to what you do. Another way to manage costs is to have a relationship with a broker you trust. There are a few key markets. There are only like 6 major film markets, and not every market wants to quote a certain budget of film. So when you're 1 to 5 million, there are like 2 places that will quote you, 3 maybe. Once you get over 10, most people want to quote you. You don't need to quote all over the market. It's a lot of work. It's a whole lot of follow-up questions, but you want to make sure you get a good solid quote from a provider that is well rated and respectable and known for having good claim service and coverage as well. And by working with a broker that you trust, you can find that. Also, if you have a previous relationship with this broker, that broker's going to have an idea of what rates are workable and what aren't. And you can let the broker know, like, hey, this is really high. I didn't expect that. Maybe there's some changes that we can make to deductibles. Maybe there's a term or condition that we could put in place that maybe would get it down a little bit and that you as the filmmaker would be comfortable with. So rather than just going all over the market and sending your stuff out to everyone, part of the problem with that is often they'll put different information in these different applications. And so you're getting quotes that are apples and oranges, not apples to apples. I think finding somebody that you feel good about, you feel like you can ask questions to, and that you feel like understands what you're trying to do, you can work with someone like that to maybe make some changes to get the price down, but also still make you comfortable with the sort of risk that you're taking on yourself.
That's so insightful as always. Adam, thank you for joining me on Production and sharing just a small bit of your incredible expertise on production insurance.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Cam.
Awesome. Talk to you later.
All right.
On Production is brought to you by Wrapbook. With automated time card calculations, real-time production accounting, and payroll you can run with just a click, Wrapbook makes it easier than ever to manage your entire production from one login. To learn more about how Wrapbook is transforming payroll and production accounting, check out our website at wrapbook.com.